Okay, welcome back to the Nick and Joe Show, folks. I'm Nick, he's Joe, he's in Ottawa, I'm in Thunder Bay. And I will be until Saturday. Then I get to drive home again. If I haven't said so yet, Joseph, I know it's not really your season, but your season is Hanukkah, so happy Hanukkah. We have the holidays virtually upon us. And that's a reminder to me to go out and get my Christmas shopping done before the 24th.
Okay, so
one of the things,
yeah, just that you know, we're still in the middle of a couple of days left in Hanukkah this year, and you're in North Bay.
What did I say?
You keep saying Thunder Bay. You love Thunder Bay.
God, why?
Because
why? I know there's two places.
Well, of course there's two places.
They got to change the name of one of them.
Have you ever been to Thunder Bay?
Yes.
Of course. See, so have I several times. The gateway to North Superior.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's up here it's like in North Bay, it's cold and it's snowing and Lake Nipissing is freezing over and talk about climate change. I really want to get my hands on David Suzuki and insist on the global warming he promised, because so far we haven't seen it. And I'm tired of freezing to death in the wintertime. However, it's a beautiful town, and I think in the summertime, it just must be even more spectacular. Some of the homes here are just gorgeous.
I have not been to North Bay for a while, but I will say this. I just want to make one more point about Thunder Bay, Nick. If any of our listeners ever find themselves in Thunder Bay, make sure that you it's about a 2.5, 3 hour drive north of Thunder Bay to Wawa, Ontario. And
I've been there.
And don't forget to stop and have a picture taken beside the Wawa Goose.
And don't forget to drive even further north and go to Manitowaj.
Okay, well,
it's a mining town.
While we're at it, how about Churchill, Manitoba?
That is a great place to go.
There's a great place in Churchill, Manitoba we know about. It's called Lazy Bear Lodge.
And I don't think there's much lazy about them bears that run that place.
Well, there's nothing lazy about the lodge either. Anyway,
I think this is a cute name.
Free advert for our friends up at Lazy Bear Expeditions in Churchill, Manitoba. Well worth it.
A shout out to Wally and our good friends up there at Lazy Bear Lodge.
And I got to tell you this, okay? If you want to learn the truth about polar bears and the effect of global warming on polar bears, you have to go up to spend a few days up with the boys up at the Lazy Bear Lodge, because they'll take you out and they'll show you the truth about polar bears. And I got to tell you, it's not what David Suzuki and Al Gore are claiming it is. And that's a great way. That's a great way to segue into climate change.
As a matter of fact, it's funny that you mentioned that.
It's funny we should mention it.
In the crossover, we have this story that comes to us all the way from CBC, from downtown Brooklyn. We have this story. And I mentioned Brooklyn because that's where the head of the CBC presently lives, is in Brooklyn.
Hold on. Wait a minute.
On Canadian taxpayer dollars.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me that the head of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation is living in Brooklyn, New York?
Yes, I am.
Okay, that is just too much. We'll have to get onto that a little bit more.
Okay, well, we'll dig that one up. I saw that, and I thought, why am I surprised at this? Why is this something that makes me if this is so typical, the hypocrisy. How can you be the head of a nation's broadcaster and not live in that nation?
Okay, let's save this. We have to save this.
We'll save that fire for another day.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to chase that one down, okay?
Absolutely.
All right, but
Tune
in the
in
meantime,
next week for more.
Yeah.
All right, so from that august organization, there is this story dated December 16th. And it's about farmers and the new carbon tax. So let me read just a couple of paragraphs to give you a sense of it. Farmers across Canada were already angry and upset over Prime Minister Trudeau's existing carbon tax, but are now even more upset at the increases announced this month. Groups such as the Grain Farmers of Ontario, Grain Growers of Ontario, Grain Federation of Agriculture, and Western Canadian wheat growers have all come up with shock, anger, and strong criticism of the plan. Trudeau announced a plan called A Healthy Environment and a Healthy Economy from Environment and Climate Change Canada on the 11th of December. He said that in an effort to meet and exceed the plan's reduction in Canada's greenhouse gas emissions, so-called carbon taxes, a charge on fuels, would be increased by $15 a ton each year starting in 2023. Currently at $30 a ton, it will rise to $50 by 2023, and with the newly announced increase, it will reach $170 a ton by 2030. Prior to the last election, the Liberal government denied they would push tax beyond $50 a ton. Now, one more paragraph, and then we'll break loose on this. Farmers, especially grain farmers, require large amounts of energy in their operations. Grain farmers need heat to dry their grain properly and have already been complaining about the significant added cost, which reduces farm profit and viability as the added cost can't be passed on. Now, do you know why they can't be passed on, Joseph?
I can't imagine.
Because they have grain marketing boards. And the prices are preset.
Oh, that bugaboo. That's been a while since we talked about. It's a while since we talked about those.
So, as their costs go up, their income doesn't. They can't pass it on to the consumer.
Well,
great way to drive a company out of business, don't you think?
That is a problem, and in fairness, it's probably a problem that the marketing boards are at some point in time going to try to address. I'm sure. Because if there's one thing that marketing boards are all about, it's about, gouging the consumer.
And they're good at it, too.
They are outstanding at it.
Yep.
Well, look,
anyway, the current tax will cost farmers around $60 million annually in natural gas just to dry crops. Adding a new tax will triple those costs.
Right.
Anyway, it goes on, but you get the point. And all of this is only going to make our food more expensive because sooner or later they have to adjust the prices upward. But how many farmers can survive? How many businesses, never mind agriculture, how many businesses could have a ceiling put on the price they can charge and then have their input costs, what it costs to manufacture or produce their product, continuously go up before there's no difference between the cost of production and the cost of retail, which means there's no profit, which means the farmer or the business in question goes broke.
Right. Well, here's the good news, and for our international listeners, we've been talking about the carbon tax here that they're talking about imposing, the increases that they're talking about imposing here in Canada. But of course, carbon taxes are an active subject in many jurisdictions around the world, not just in Canada. But here's the good news in Canada, Nick, and I think that you and our listeners, our Canadian listeners in particular, are going to appreciate this. And that is that this is a promise that the Trudeau Liberal government is making, which means if I was a betting man, I would be betting a lot of money on them actually not following through on it. That doesn't mean that they're not going to increase carbon taxes, but I suspect that as time goes on, that the reality is going to catch up with them, and they're not going to admit that they were wrong, perish the thought. What they're going to do is they're going to find ways to dodge and weave, and obfuscate and avoid, and eventually they're going to the whole thing is going to die, or they'll find some other thing to get onto. And as a witness to this, as an example of this, take, for example, the promise that we heard this week that we are going to spend somewhere, I think it was $2 billion, planting trees in Canada. Now, I happen to think that's a great idea. Lovely idea. But it's a promise that this government made already several years ago and never followed through on. So they didn't plant a single tree. So it's an example of recycled promises and broken promises. Again, whether you agree with the policy of planting trees or not, I don't disagree with it. I think it's a great idea. But they never did it. And here they are 2, 3, 4 years later promising the same thing and getting praise, a pat on the back and go, oh yeah, that's a great idea. You know, one of the problems that we have in politics these days, Nick, I think, is that people have too short a memory. Or they're just not paying attention. So, you know, they hear it, they think it's a good idea, so they give they give praise for that kind of thing. So that's my take on this carbon tax thing. I think that the government's going to follow through. I don't think the government is going to follow through with the kind of diligence and to fullest extent possible. I think that, as I said, reality is going to catch up with them, and rather than admitting that they were wrong, they'll just find a way to wiggle out of it. And I'm okay with them wiggling out of this one, okay?
I don't mind them wiggling out of this one, but I'll tell you, if you want reality to catch up, it better enter the race soon, because the Liberals got a long lead.
Well, but let's talk for a few minutes here about climate change in general, and in particular, Nick, the Paris Accord, which is now more than 4.5 years old. It's coming up to its 5-year anniversary this spring. I think in April, if I'm not mistaken, is when it was signed originally. And this past week and the past 2 weeks, there's been a lot of noise coming out of world leaders again. You know, now that it looks like we have these vaccines coming out, and, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic panic is going to be slowly receding, I think, over the next few months. And the governments out there that have been leading the charge in fomenting panic are going to give themselves a pat on the back, declare victory, and move back onto climate change. And we were seeing it in the past week with declarations again from world leaders out of the United Nations, the Secretary General, and, you know, the usual suspects talking about how the world is going to come to a disastrous end. We're not meeting our targets. We're not doing enough, et cetera, et cetera. And all of this, I think, is leading up to a new climate change agreement. We'll call it Paris 2.0.
God.
I don't know. I'm not aware that anybody's actually negotiating it, but I think that this is a good time for people, including people out there who are big believers in man-made climate change and who are very big believers in the Paris Accord and all of the protocols attached thereto. What I want to point out is this, Nick. It's clear now from the rhetoric that we're hearing from world leaders that the Paris Accord has not worked, that the agreement that was reached in April of 2016 has not had the desired effect in reducing so-called greenhouse gases, particularly CO2 emissions. Now, regardless of what your position is on that, I'm not suggesting, I don't want to get into a debate about whether CO2 is a greenhouse gas or not. I don't care. In fact, if you think CO2 is a greenhouse gas and it's causing global warming, and if we don't rein it in, the Earth is going to burn up. Okay, I want people who are the most radical supporters of the Paris Accord. I want them. To them, I'm talking. Hit the pause button and ask yourself, who is it that was, over the last 2 or 3 years, the biggest, most